Hey guys, Malcolm Moore here, and thank you for joining me on this beautiful day. Today we are going to be talking S-turns. When you see a good snowboarder who just seems to flow down the mountain in an effortless style, unlike how I said that word, they are making S-turns. And the main ingredient for you to be able to do S-turns, I would say, is being able to get an early edge change. So before I explain that, let me just show you the difference between a beginner turn and an S-turn with an early edge change. So in a beginner turn, things start off quite slow, quite skidded, and it's just a case of releasing pressure under the edge, allowing the board to point down the slope, and then changing edge and getting your control back in a somewhat skidded matter. It's very much a case of accelerating and then decelerating. Whereas, where are we? Over there. In an S-turn, it's much more fluid. I carry some momentum and grip across the slope, which allows me to just roll over onto my new edge early in the turn. And by doing this, I control my speed the whole way round, and it doesn't have that start-stop nature to it. Let's do a couple more. Okay, come on in. So, the first part of that turn, like I said, I'll tell you what, I'll put a little diagram up here so you can see. So we're going to start right at the top of that S, and that is where we start in that traverse where we're gripping across the slope. And it's essential you're able to grip across the slope to allow you to roll onto that new edge. So gripping and traversing across the slope like that requires you to have good edging skills. And good edging skills is kind of built up of three key components. You have one constant and two variables. So the constant, that is making sure you have good posture. And if you're unsure what that looks like, then check out this video up here. The two variables, the two things you can change, that is firstly your vertical movements, that's basically getting down low or standing up taller. And the second one is your lateral movements, which is how you lean into the slope. A bit like when you're riding a bike, you can lean into the turn. We can do the same thing on a snowboard. So starting in a traverse, let's have a play with those movements, beginning with the vertical. Now if I stand up too tall, immediately you can see my board has gone into a skid and I've lost grip. If I get down too low, I'm gonna mess my posture up and I can't grip either. So the key is going to be finding that balance somewhere in the middle. Right about here, I'm leaving that nice thin line in the slope behind me. Same again on the toe edge, knees slightly bent, not too tall, not too small. Now we're going to move on to the lateral movements. This piece is a little bit bumpy. So that means leaning into the slope. If I lean too far back into the slope, which I don't like to demonstrate because you can see I almost slid out, that's not going to work. And if I don't need enough into the slope, once again I don't have any grip. So it's about finding that balance of both the vertical and the lateral movements to allow you to do this, leave a nice thin line in the snow. Okay, so once you have that, you're ready to go for this early edge change. But how exactly do you do that? Well, those two variables that we've just been talking about, vertical and lateral, it's getting a bit Mowgli here. Well, they are of course variables, meaning that we can change them throughout the turn to help us with the turn. You know, when we were traversing a minute ago, I'll show you now, when I stood up, I lost grip, okay? But we can actually use that to aid us at the edge change. So I come across, thin line behind me, stand up, and that's how I roll onto my new edge. A small vertical movement there helps me release the pressure under the edge, and a small lateral movement helps me cross over into my new position. So that may sound complicated, but essentially all I'm doing is standing up and sinking down, standing up and sinking down, standing up and sinking down and doing what we called an up unweighted turn. Woo! Gets flat here, so we're gonna go a little bit faster. So let's bring my trusty S diagram back into this. So we've done the top part of the turn. You've got that nice clean traverse. You're making that early edge change. You're setting yourself up to continue through that smooth arc. But what if the rest of the turn, it isn't making that smooth arc? What if you're skidding out or you're juddering and you're just not achieving that nice S shape? Well, we're gonna come back to those variables, to those vertical and those lateral movements, because we need to feed them back into the turn to finish off that turn nice and smoothly. So as I say, we started up there where that red dot is. I stole from a Nurofen packet, by the way, in the traverse. You stand up slightly, a small vertical movement to help flatten the board, and you make that small lateral movement over the board to cross onto your new edge. As you do this, the board starts pointing down the slope. So see where we are in the turn now. And this part of the turn is what I call the lazy part of the turn. You're just going with gravity. There's no forces acting against you. But once you get to this part here, right in the fall line, as soon as you pass that point, then gravity and your momentum, everything, it wants to keep pulling you down the slope, but you've got to do something to stop that from happening. And the key here is to sink back into that lower vertical position and incline your whole body laterally into the slope. Again, very similar to the analogy of riding a bike. You just got to commit and lean into it. And it's a bit of a feeling out process, a bit like what we were doing in the traverse earlier, trying to achieve that nice thin line. But as long as by at that middle point in the turn, in the fall line, where that red dot is now, as long as by that point in the turn, you get yourself back in a low position, your posture is correct, and you just trust yourself and laterally lean inside the turn, the board will grip and it's going to pull you round in a nice smooth arc. So let's put all of that into practice, starting here in the traverse. Then I come up and I just incline my whole body laterally into the turn, ready for the next one, up and down. You can see that I'm controlling my speed, not by skidding, but by making this nice smooth S shape. And these turns, let me show you, they work in a whole host of conditions. If I jump off here into the powder, oh, not yet, here's the powder. It's the same kind of turns I'm making here. Standing up, sinking down, running out of speed a little bit. That wasn't the best demo, but if you watch this video up here, that'll teach you how to make these S turns work in the powder. And really, as things get a bit steeper, you have to be a bit more aggressive with the movements. You can see now I'm laterally inclining my body into the slope a little bit more, getting down a little bit lower, but I'm still just standing up at the edge change to help release the pressure under the board. Nice. And when you get onto something a lot steeper as well, it's still these kind of turns you want to make, just you're going to want to be making a bit like this, much smaller S-shaped turns. This means less time spent with your board pointing down the slope in the full line. And what I've taught you right now with these vertical and these lateral movements and getting your edging right, setting you up for that early edge change, those I should say are the fundamentals of S turns. But when you want to start making these really small, tight turns like this, then there's a couple of other videos you're going to need to watch. And luckily for you, I've already made them. So the first thing you're going to need to be able to do is add in a little bit of fore and aft movement to the mix. And the second thing is going to be able to really use your feet and your knees independently, kind of as levers to help pull the board round in a tighter arc. And I will put those videos here and here. So make sure you check them out. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks to those of you who've been hitting that PayPal tip jar. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.